PTV, oberoende, piratistisk media, skapad och finansierad av tittarna.
Turn it down, there we go. Beautiful, and we are lacking you. Why? I know why. Let's fix that. But for the rest of you, welcome to PTV International. This is, I think we've done a couple of episodes that I have not kept count. I would guess 25? Possible? Is that a wild guess?
That's very optimistic. Probably not 25. If you're counting the really old ones, maybe. But ours this year, maybe we may reach 10 if we're lucky.
That's potentially true. Unfortunately. But we're getting somewhere. Let's see, which channel are we? We're there. Beautiful. Perfect. There we go. Nice. Then we are here. How are you? Back in Finland again. Did you have a good trip?
Yeah, I made it. I survived.
Yes, you survived.
I survived Sweden.
Despite all the shootings and craziness. Did you hear about this, by the way? Let's talk about this a little bit. Because the shootings in Sweden are crazy right now. Did you watch this? You watched this shooting, I hope. Here is a hero who actually managed to catch this. The tweet is Sundbyberg or Africa. Okay, let's have a look.
We're starting highly international here.
Yeah, this is clearly international, European.
Yeah, international organized crime, probably.
Yeah, I mean, this is because of Europe and immigration. Look at this craziness, all right? It's a seriously neat production value.
Yeah, well, it's weird how even like the store signs, the signs look fake somehow.
Yeah.
Like those look like the fakest thing in the video.
Well, Swedish right-wing Twitter got a little bit upset about the movie shooting that took place, and but you actually survived being in Sweden, which is amazing.
Yeah, apparently, like the Einar thing was like a few days maybe before I arrived. When was it actually?
Yeah, you were. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on a more serious note, I mean, this is obviously just kind of crazy. Obviously, I mean, it's so funny. It's like strangely said, a shooting is a shooting, regardless. Like that's literally the comments. It's bad because it could have been. It could have been true.
It was pretty close to where I stayed in Stockholm, so the people I stayed with actually mentioned it.
Yeah. Pharaoh visits Sweden and Einar dies. Curious.
Yes, coincidence.
Exactly. I think not.
But Finns are a bad omen. When we start crossing the sea,
you
need to be careful.
Actually, maybe we should start with the news in that order, because this is such a weird segue. But Sweden actually retrieved something to Finland, right?
Yes.
And I want to dig a little bit in this, because this is a pretty nasty history.
This could be its whole episode, and maybe at some point we're going to do deep dives on topics like this. So pay attention.
Pay attention, you crazy.
So the card is called "Goddamn It, Sweden." If you're having trouble finding it.
There we are. Exactly. Sweden pressed to return Finnish skulls taken for race studies. The remains of 82 people were taken from Finnish graveyards in the 19th century for studies in support of race theory. Finland's Minister for Education and Culture is preparing an official request for the repatriation of human remains removed from abandoned churchyards and cemeteries in Finland nearly 150 years ago and shipped to Sweden for race studies. Most of the human remains, mainly skulls, which are still held in the collection of Stockholm's Karolinska Institute, were taken from the cemetery and ruined church in Pelkänä in Finland.
Sorry, I'd like to stop here. Just the year that this they have been dated to. I mean, the retrieval has been dated to 1873. So this was like over 60 years after Finland had been passed over from Sweden to Russia. So you guys were still there digging up skulls, like over half a century after we weren't even part of your empire.
Exactly, your goddamn empire.
Seriously. What the fuck?
What the fuck? Could you please stop digging up
Can you please explain it at least?
Like, your colonialism is not okay, bro. No, but I mean, seriously, this is kind of... it goes to a larger narrative that I hope we can talk about, which comes from Carl von Linné, who was Swedish, and his ideas of race that were fundamentally very, very, very important and for modern racism, essentially, and for race studies. And Sweden was leading in that and collected skulls from all over the world and did all sorts of funky measurements and so on. And we haven't even touched on the Finnish minorities in Sweden that I know we just mentioned quickly, how life were for them, or the Sápmi people and so on. And there's actually a lot to talk about there. But at least, to some extent, I mean, I just wish this was bigger news in Sweden, because we need to talk about this in Sweden. Like, it's so dead silent about this. I mean, if you wouldn't have mentioned this, no one would have known, right? It's like, this is just nothing in Sweden.
Yeah, and there has been an apology a couple of years ago, but somehow the remains haven't been returned yet.
Yeah, like...
Interesting.
Nyfiket. Curious.
Maybe there's still some work being done. Maybe the research is still ongoing.
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, we gotta keep them. We are just measuring a little bit more here. We have more accurate measurements.
Yeah, we're still missing some crucial data.
Exactly. They just changed the millimeter measurement by, the width of a light year. So, the speed of light. So we gotta update.
You have to solve the riddle of whether Finns can be counted as European or something.
Yeah. I mean, which is the shit they were literally doing. And to some extent, this started with Carl von Linné, and I think this is actually important to note. I mean, not that it probably would have happened without him, but he was definitely one that turned it in that made Sweden kind of the center for a lot of these studies.
The guy is famous for, like, classifying things, classifying tons and tons of things.
Yeah.
And
he classified humans into races.
Can be taken a bit too far in some respects, or can be used in interesting ways.
Yeah, and I mean, he was pretty clear on classifying humans into races, where the white race was closest to God, etc. I mean, a lot of those stereotypes that lives on today, these are stereotypes built on his classifications of people, and I mean that
also hello Christianity. Our very old friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Christianity really liked his way of describing things, not the slightly more Darwinian way of saying that people somehow developed from other species, and it could potentially be that that we came from the monkeys potentially, and that we developed into fitting into the habitat where we were in. So that could explain. That was not what Carl von Linné was saying. It was more God. We are close to God. And they are far from God. And because they're far from God, they're dirty. That was more of it. And I think this is something I want to dig in. Hopefully we can dig in this a little bit more. Because he's kind of revered in Sweden still. And it's like, whenever we talk, he was kind of racist, but still, he was pretty good. All in all, pretty good dude.
Yeah, we're just not good. Like, our so-called developed part of the world is just not good at reckoning with anything we've done so far. I mean, we do joke even on this channel about Finland being basically colonized by Sweden, but that's actually kind of a point of contention, I think, when it comes to actual historians. And also, Finland has been doing not nice things to the Sami as well as other linguistic minorities and ethnic minorities as well. So we're in no way exempt from any of this.
No. I mean, at least it's important that we remember and talk about it. And I think, I mean, and it's also so weird that becomes such a huge point of contention, right? I mean, like, it's important that we know our history, and not just because, and the actual facts. Because it's good that we try to, probably bad idea to redo all of this shit, right? And I mean, this is a huge discussion point in the States, and obviously it's here as well. But hopefully, like, I think, like, looking back on BLM, right? I think a lot of people, at least for a lot of people, it was the first time maybe hearing of the Tulsa massacre, right? Because you don't get to know that in schools, right, in the U.S. And stuff like that.
What was the first time?
The Tulsa massacre, or redlining, or just like.
What was the first time for many people
to hear about that?
Yeah, what was the first time? Like, what were that's?
BLM. I mean, the BLM protests, right? That they actually, I think that to many regards, even though from a policy point of view, it was horrible, and actually is leading to a lot of policies that are really bad for people who want to demonstrate, right? Unfortunately, at least I think from my limited contacts and talking to people, it actually led to a lot of people kind of understanding that, hey, our history, there's a lot of things that we should probably talk about, right? And that doesn't mean that our country is shit and horrible and everything we do is bad, but you got to be able to criticize your country, and it's fundamentally important.
And this also ties very closer than people seem to think. This ties to just human rights violations done all over, even nowadays. Since if we can't recognize, for instance, instances of genocide, whether 100% clear, uncontested genocide, or quotation marks merely cultural genocide or the like, or forced assimilation, or however you'd like to call it, if we can't recognize, as we clearly can't right now, the instances of that have been committed in our countries and by us historically, then it's no wonder we have trouble having those discussions and recognizing when that happens still elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if we, like Sweden, want to be a humanitarian world power, right? It is kind of, we need to reconcile with our past and our present, and be honest. You can credit Linnaeus and criticize him, exactly, and it's kind of funny because I was reading, because he became, they were criticizing him for being a slave owner, which I think is kind of I believe, which is kind of a, let's put it like this. I mean, I think I saw Uppsala Universitet were writing something about it. It's like that. It's like they don't really want to talk about it. You're glossing over this. I mean, this work of Linnaeus were persistent. It was used. I mean, his thinking on this had huge implications for how we justified slavery, right? I mean, it's not. That's the thing. I mean, this had an implication for history, what he said, and you can't just say that, well, he did good things and bad things. You kind of need to go through the bad things, because it wasn't just him being a bit racist, you know what I mean? It was his that way of framing people into different races was kind of fundamental for the politics of the day and the type of racism and subjugation and slavery and the way that the West colonized. I mean, it justified that, and his thinking was important, right? Yeah. And I'm not. I mean, it seems like I don't think you should gloss over there, and they're still kind of doing that in Uppsala University. So hopefully we can have a little bit of a special deep dive into this on the channel, but at least silently we're heading back some skulls.
You're not actually, if you finish up the article, apparently they're still stalled, and some Finnish MPs filing another written question about it.
Jesus, okay. In 2019,
so looking at it again, some point later. I mean, this year, hopefully, but
yeah. I mean, in 2019, the Karolinska Institute issued an apology for their removal from Finland, but has not returned the remains despite numerous requests from organizations and private individuals. Johnny Hittola, senior minister, was that a good pronunciation? I felt like I kind of got it there.
Not your best, but
yeah,
do go on.
Well, it's not my worst either, and I'm pretty happy about that. Senior ministerial advisor at Finland's Minister of Education and Culture told Swedish Public Radio last weekend that the remains are to be reinterred where they were excavated. If the cemetery where they were taken from is no longer in use, the remains will be buried in the current cemeteries of the parishes from where they were taken. MP Pauli Kuru, who has filed a formal written question with the government about the issue, says the repatriation will be examined again this autumn. Efforts to convince the Karolinska Institute to return the remains, including those of the parish in Pelkene, have been stalled for several years.
Yep.
It makes you wonder why.
Yeah. I mean, the Karolinska seem to be really attached to those calls.
Yeah. Well, let's follow this one.
Based on the article, there has been something on Swedish Public Radio about it. So,
yeah.
I don't know, chat listeners, if you hear or see something about this, please tell us why. Like, do we have an explanation?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, what can I think? The problem, maybe maybe they don't even know anymore. I mean, that's a possible. They are like, if they, I mean, but I think they have a pretty good. I'm not sure. I mean, that would be a potential. They actually have lost remains, and they're really, like, oh fuck, what are we gonna do? Because that could create. I mean, they're probably doing everything they can to make sure that this doesn't hit Swedish news. This is what I would say. Like, and if they lose something or something isn't correct, this is probably going to hit Sweden. Like, Karolinska loses, have, like, what the fuck?
And just makes you think about all the other bones they probably have in their collection.
Yeah.
And probably like people or groups that they might not even be humoring with this, responses.
Yeah, and Naknet is saying something true here. The old colonial mindset still being in our heads. We're not racist. We're just better than anyone else. Exactly. And it's this typical thinking that the West is more progressed. We've come further. We are the pinnacle of humanness. All of those things.
Whole concept of development is really interesting when you actually start looking into it and looking at how the term has been used and what it's actually connected to. Usually it boils down to the West knowing what's best for the rest of the world, and sometimes even each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's often linked to incredibly narrow-minded ideas of what other people and cultures are and what they have done and how they act. I mean, just looking at the idea that we think of Africa as tribes, tribal countries, that, the way that it's depicted on. I mean, it's all of those things is nuts, but still very strong.
Strangelurk in chat says, I would argue that countries that engage more heavily in colonialism tend to be more racist. And I'm not sure about that. Again, you could go, like, you could wade into, like, the questions of how racism is even measured, but Finland wasn't, Finland has a colonial or imperial past as part of Swedish and Russian empires. But like the argument is always made that we were just one of the provinces or like subjugated areas among others, and we didn't have the full agency or whatever. But it doesn't mean that we are not part of that history. So and that our people, I mean, Finnish people, people from the area of Finland today, weren't involved in those activities. So, but many still argue that we weren't as heavily involved as many other European countries. And yet, apparently, according to some study from just past couple of years, maybe 2019, 2020, according to that one, Finland is the most racist country in Europe. So there might not be like a direct correlation there.
Yeah. Yeah, and yes, and I mean it's not an easy thing to necessarily measure properly. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about, you know what? Wait, let's talk about Facebook. Let's do this shit real quick. I mean, let's go through just the thing, because it's been so many things in such a short while. Let's see if we can.
They have a scandal per week at this point, and now they're having also, in addition to the one scandal per week, they are having like a PR event per week to compensate for the, just in sheer quantity, for the bad coverage they're getting with other kinds of coverage.
Yeah. I mean, it started with it being uncovered that they had a VIP list, essentially, of users that could say whatever they wanted. And that wasn't a part of that wasn't ever being pre-screened. Then it turned out they had a blacklist. I mean, you could probably understand a blacklist, but it turns out there was a shadow type of blacklist as well that went public. Then you had the whistleblower, right, who fundamentally said that they know what they're doing and they're capitalizing on hate, essentially, and went through all of that. And she also released a lot of documents that this week showed that they also kept selling private information to companies, which they have already been fined for and promised to never do again. So they're essentially continuing to breaking the law. And not only that, it turns out in internal documentations that they're also evaluating internally for the algorithm. They're evaluating the anger reaction 5 times higher than anything else, because so not only do they know what their platform leads to, they're actively reinforcing that type of behavior from people on the platform, because they know that it leads to more sales. So when you see that the Herman Cain Awards is all filled with Facebook posts and all of these Facebook groups, we're just looking at one who took photos of some dude walking by, saying there's a robber, what did you do? These are the things. I mean, this is being socially engineered by Facebook for profit, and this is not just them not doing anything. It's them actively wanting to build that sort of platform.
Did you intend to open an article, or are you just stuck?
We could probably, I mean, the blacklist feels a little bit too old, but the name change is pretty fun, because that's so in an order to what
a graphic.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Oh, this is the metaverse. Such a metaverse picture. The coming name change.
Going back to the 90s with the cyberspace stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is just...
Except everyone has better editing software on average.
Yeah, we will effectively transition from people seeing us primarily being a social media company to being a metaverse company. And then you can wonder, what the fuck is a metaverse? All right. And this actually is not necessarily that clear. Typically, and if you look at what they mean, I mean, normally this is a term that's used a little bit in AR. It's used when you are trying to build the complete platforms where you're interacting with technology in new ways, such as AR and all of that stuff, where media and real life entertainment where you are having that type of much deeper integration with technology, such as IoT, AR, etc. The thing is, I think the only way to... what I'm guessing is that they want to be what they're doing in a lot of the poor countries right now, third world countries, where they've been able to enter and become internet, which is essentially being the end-to-end solution for all forms of communication between people. And if you look at their history, where they've been trying to build a blockchain, they've started, with their own coin. They're starting to build, they have trained the AIs on all of our profile pictures and all of that stuff. So just taking up more of the vertical, becoming internet essentially is the way that I feel they're trying to move towards. I'm not sure. I just
unlucky that the public opinion started swaying, like turning against them around the same time. So I think Libra coin, or what I was supposed to be.
Yeah, Libra coin. Yeah.
Like the regulators pretty much buried it. I think. At least I haven't heard about it for a while now.
Yeah, and I would say this probably because they want to, you can integrate that sort of technology inside your platform. I mean, if everyone is there, you could move the trading. Likes has a value, right? But if likes is tied to a type of coin that can be traded, this is kind of, like everything in one place. It's more a little bit more what actually WeChat has done, right? Which is a complete financial integration. So your social media is the bank.
Right. And a lot of other things as well.
Yes, pretty much everything. And the one that constantly surveils you, right? Which is Facebook's fundamental business model. Surveillance.
It's funny how there's this scaremongering about China and do we want to become them?
Yeah.
Well, we are actually becoming them, and it's fine because it's private companies doing it.
Yeah. We always talk about the market communism. We joke about that. No, but I mean, it's a form of it is exactly that. And we talk about. I mean, I used to use. I mentioned that sometimes. I used to use a software called Mention. I think they still exist. They've become incredibly expensive, and I don't think.
Yeah, one of those social media dashboards.
Yeah. You can try this out, but what they do for the paid users, this is expensive as fuck, is essentially, they do what, I'm not sure if you remember what Clout did back in the day, or BuzzSumo. All of the free versions of this has kind of disappeared, but they allow you, yes, to monitor all of your social media, monitor your competition social media, but primarily also see who your key influence makers are, like who is posting about you, and also you get a score. Like, are these people important enough to me to respond? And you can build and extract lists of the people that are powerful or interesting enough. I mean, you can make sure that when you host a competition, you always make sure that the right people win. That could, So we already have this. I mean, all bigger companies do this. With the moment that you check in on your airplane, they know your social score. Right? I mean, this is just privatized. I mean, if they'll know what you work with, they know if you're important, they know all of this shit.
Even before this, like a private, I mean, the US in particular, I don't know, maybe with Sweden being like the little US in Europe, maybe you have it as well, but just private credit scores, basically, like gaming your credit score with using your card in a certain way, like getting strategically into debt and being able to pay back within a certain amount of time, like gaming your score like that. That's like a financial skill that's taught to kids. I mean, if you get lucky with your family and parents, you get that's a financial skill you get taught in the US, and it's normal for them. And that is used for like to gauge whether you're eligible for certain kinds of loans, like how good of a loan or mortgage you can get, and all these personal financing things. But the thing is, since these are maintained by private companies, they can and have been auctioned off to all these different services that sell the information these like packages of information on just private individuals to anyone who can pay enough, and those include the credit score. So it has been used. It might be still illegal in most of the country to actually use that information, or use, say, the financial credit score to actually make certain kinds of judgments, maybe hiring decisions, or whether you're going to let them, like, have them as a tenant. It might be illegal, but it doesn't mean that they don't get used.
I mean, the thing is also, and this is what I don't understand. I mean, you could put it like this. The social credit score in China is nuts, okay? And I think there's an added layer of craziness when you're adding the credit score, because this is essentially merging the banks. This is why the metaverse is so scary. I mean, are you going to merge the social media stuff with the bank? I mean, the big problem here is, like, in China, they know everything, right? Because you are paying through your social media. So they know everything you buy. They know exactly where you are. They know every place you've been. They know every photo you've ever taken. They know everything you've ever potentially uploaded. And they are using AI to aggregate this type of data. But what we tend to forget when we're in the West is that this is done here. The exact same thing is done here. Now, it's a little bit trickier because they have to gather data from different places. But your credit score, I mean, like, finding out exactly where you are, where you've been, it kind of tells you a pattern of what you've been buying. Everyone you've ever known, you know, all of the people that you've ever met is on Facebook. All of the photos of your face that you can be used to recognize and consolidate data across other platforms. And naturally, how influential you are. You know, and that type of influencer score is used on a daily basis. Just filter you out if you're not powerful enough. Why would we care about you? I mean, this is incredibly insightful data for companies that want to market their products, for instance, or want to upgrade you onto the first class, or want to, you know, make sure that you deliver a good impression. If you don't have a big Twitter following and are publicly available and catch a, you know, over 50% in the score, you're becoming a different class of citizen, right? And I feel like we should, again, be much more angry about this here, and much more worried about this.
But this is basically what the political pirates have been trying to say for over 10 years now, but only now are some people starting to care, and still most people don't. It's actually kind of wild thinking back even like 10 years, how different the discussion was back then, considering how much of these structures were already in place back then.
Yeah, Banana Man has a hot take. We cannot really understand the current situation for a citizen in China since our media is heavily...
Yeah, I was about to ask whether that's your alternate account in the chat.
That's my alternative account. Yeah, I obviously kind of agree with Banana Man on some of the things here. But we can also understand a lot. But it's hard, and this is not really about that discussion, though. We can have a China discussion at some other point. But just going back to this, that a little bit what you're talking about, we probably should look at Facebook and at the people who are doing this to us, and be sure that we don't let that happen here. All right, because before we, you know, like, let's be upset about China, but let's also not let it happen here.
Yeah, the great risk in portraying China as this great other, as having a completely different kind of system or systems or society to us, something that can't be like entirely comprehended, or something we can't take, we can't judge with the same measures, or just like all of this like Orientalist kind of like mystifying, like mysticization, and also like otherization. All of this like makes us less able to see when the same stuff that we seem to see happening there is happening here as well.
Yeah. And I mean, given how our intervention has worked out historically, I think it's maybe good that we look at least here first. Now, speaking of that, actually, why not jump to another news that's slightly related? I actually know we talked about this on Chapel a little bit, but there's 500,000 South Korean workers on strike. This is a massive, massive, massive strike. It was a one-day general strike in urban centers and farmlands, culminating on National All-Day People's Mobilization that is going to happen on January in 2022. The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, KCTU, the country's largest labor union, they're basically asking for these things: abolish irregular work, part-time, temporary or contract labor with little or no benefits, and extended labor protections to all workers. Give workers power in economic restructuring decisions during times of crisis. Ooh! Nationalize key industries and socialize basic services like education and housing. I mean, these are three topics where I feel like this is really strong, this is really on point, it's kind of easy for people to understand, and it's broad political things that is so good to raise awareness about, just generally to talk about.
Yeah, and also a general strike in that, again, so-called developed country and economy is actually huge news. We haven't had many of those for a few decades now. I mean, strikes by like crucial or critical industries can, like nationwide ones, can really hit a country hard and can get some coverage. But like an actual general strike, it's huge.
Yeah.
I'm unfortunately not like familiar enough. I know some things about South Korea, but I'm not super familiar, so I'm not comfortable talking too much about the conditions there or the context. But yeah.
I mean, many of these irregular workers labor in the gig economy. So essentially, a lot of this has to do with not accepting the gig economy and saying, no, this is enough. And I mean, this is spreading. I mean, like, we need to stop the gig economy. Parts of that is absolutely horrible for any sort of worker organization as well. So being able to unionize gig work is a big issue in Sweden, for instance. Which, like, they kind of bypass all of the laws by doing it, these apps, by doing it this way.
Yeah, it's kind of misleading almost to be talking. I can't decide if it's misleading to be talking about the gig economy instead of the platform economy, since the platform economy is what this stuff usually gets shorthanded as. But then again, like on a closer look, I might actually like the way they're going back to gig economy, since that was a word like 10-15 years ago, and that's fundamentally what it still is.
Yeah,
this is one of like this whole this tech optimism and like the rise of big tech as a major influence in society and in the economy. This is kind of one of the core things that's happened with it. They claim to have invented or reinvented something. They claim to have innovated or have claim to have done digitalization, when all they're actually doing is trying to reach a monopoly status with venture capital money, while like basically maintaining some semblance of a potential profitability through just circumventing existing labor regulation.
I mean, exactly. I mean, what is actually, you can say that it's definitely more convenient potentially for end users. It's not that traditional couldn't have an app and that they can't do that anymore. The innovation step is done, right? That's not hard for any. Their competitive advantage is the misuse of labor, right? And insecurity of the people working there. I mean, that is the business idea, right? That is the innovation here, is that they are bypassing labor practices.
At least a reframing of something and using technology in a way it hasn't like recognizably been used before, but still, again, with the considering kinds of things that usually get connected, like the connotations of the word innovation as something that sort of removes, often is seen as like removing any kind of zero-sum what's the word? Like the idea that innovation is what we do in order to just get more out of less, like, and to improve everyone's conditions without taking anything away from anyone, like with just making things better, advancing society and humanity without anyone having to suffer. And that's kind of the central lie here. And that's the issue with like the word innovation. It might be, if we really constrict the definition, an innovation may have happened here, but like the way the word has been used is kind of duplicitous.
Yeah, I mean, it's seen as a positive word, but it obviously, and I think, I mean, the best innovation to increase your profit is an innovation that cuts your costs. That's always relatively riskless. If you can invent a way to cut your costs, you don't take any risk. I mean, that's the best innovation you could potentially do. That's why our current stock market-led economy is focusing on that so much. And why, for instance, the LG hired goons to pour water into workers' tents as they slept, one worker exclaimed. What did we do wrong? Imagine this giant conglomerate comes and floods your bedroom. Can you sleep? Like, I mean, this is also why they're prepared to use such incredible amount of money to stop this. And this is exactly what we're seeing in the US on the strikes there. Why this is so problematic for them. Yes, and you had a question there in the chat.
Yeah, there was a question. Maybe I'm just going to be called non-Kringland from now on.
Yeah, non-Kringland.
Negation.
Exactly. Negating me.
Why is it non-Kringland? Like, why can't Kringland be non-Cadet Blue?
Non-Cadet Blue. Yeah, I think that's because he didn't know that you were
Yeah.
I can be non-Maya too. That's also good. But Cadet Blue. Good. The person not being a fucking raccoon. Okay, there we go. That's more clear. Whoever's
implying that we're not all raccoons here.
Exactly. It's a little bit racist, I'm gonna say. But okay, fine. Fine? No, I mean, I suggest you read this because, I mean, it's a pretty long article, but they kind of go through this in a pretty good way, and they are talking about some of the practices that's been used and are used. And what's really cool here is that this is a strike on solidarity. This is like, this wouldn't happen in a lot of Western world because fundamentally the people who are in a union, they're not gig workers, right? And if they're unionized, the union workers don't like the gig workers. This is like a false dichotomy between gig workers and people who feel like they have a stable job, and obviously people who don't have a job. They're made to kind of dislike each other as if they are threatening each other, when the real money is obviously not there, right? That's not where you're losing your salary on, you know? Like, that split, that divide is so central to neoliberal thinking, and it's deep in the Western world, I'd say, at least in Sweden and particularly USA. But yes, read that article.
Yeah, it would be interesting to find someone who's like more familiar with the background of this, who has at least to some extent been maybe following what led up to this, maybe some knowledge about the organizing going on there. But I have the feeling that we're not going to be getting that from media in general, so we'd have to find, I don't know, a South Korean person, or maybe just a really fervent Korea watcher.
Yeah.
Or something. So
it's gonna be 90% K-pop probably.
Yeah,
that's what it's gonna end up with.
I mean, that would be cool, actually, if like the K-pop fandom has been mobilizing online for all kinds of like social causes recently, so it would be kind of cool if they mobilized in solidarity with this. But yeah, maybe a bit too much to expect out of a community that's based largely on consuming an entertainment product. But I mean, never say never. They probably surprised at least a number of.
Yeah, let's just say that people in that industry is being pretty abused too. Now,
yeah, like the only sort of background knowledge idea I have about South Korea is that it is extremely hyper capitalist, and
it's very similar to Sweden.
The US has had its hand in that.
Yep. Maybe take this real quick because it's good. Like we're on news that maybe you will not hear about. Israel moves ahead with thousands of settler homes despite U.S. opposition. Israel moves defines strong U.S. Christian and Palestinians condemn new housing project settlements thorny issue for the new Israeli government. Remember this. Israel moved forward on Wednesday with plans to build some 3,000 homes for Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank, defying the Biden administration's strongest criticism to date of such projects. Note that they are obviously still handing them billions of dollars to do this. And also forbidding criticism. Or forbidding, if you're in the States, you cannot legally take part of organizing against this by boycotting Israeli products. For instance, just a quick aside, but it's worth to talk about this once in a while because it doesn't really fly up on our radar, and it's important.
This is actual cancel culture.
Yeah, this is an apartheid culture that we are not supposed to talk about. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Human Rights Watch, which is which has gone out and said this, or you could take Olof Palme, who was pretty upset about this back in the day, back 30-40 years ago. I mean, it's not something new, but it's not often talked about. And when there is even a little bit breaking through in our media, I think it's worth to highlight it.
They speak of U.S. opposition or criticism, but do they say what that means? Is it just some people speaking out in Congress, or?
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, so it's kind of like some people wanted to see some kind of like a major turn happen earlier this year in the way the U.S. media, this mainstream media, reacted to the violence in Palestine, but I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't, but still, the actual consequences, like the actual actions taken, apparently it's still just talk.
Yeah.
Not actually sanctioning them or anything.
No, it's not. And I mean, note that what European, is the Europe saying anything? Are we hearing anything about this? Are they condemning this? It's very silent. I mean, and that's kind of the I mean, it's just so shit. It's actually, I don't know what to say. It's worth, our media is so silent about this. And the only thing, I mean, the only way for the Palestinians to even get a voice is to send off missiles. This the only time that it could potentially be something. I mean, it's just such an incredibly shitty situation. I actually wanted to get to some good news.
Should we be worried? I'm seeing username Benjamin Netanyahu in chat.
Benjamin Netanyahu is here.
Do you have something to say to us? Do you have something to say for yourself?
Benjamin.
Anyway, yeah, we can go ahead. Communist Pope.
Yeah,
you've been looking to talk about.
I wanted to talk about this for so long. All right, I want to read what the Pope said. I'm not going to read this whole. I mean, he does this, I think, every week actually, or every other week or something. But he has this sort of sermon, and listen to this. This is like, I ask all the great pharmaceutical laboratories to release the patents, make a gesture of humanity, and allow every country, every people, every human being to have access to the vaccines. There are countries where only 3 or 4% of the inhabitants have been vaccinated. In the name of God, I ask financial groups and international credit institutions to allow poor countries to assure the basic needs of their people and to cancel those debts that so often are contracted against the interest of those same people. In the name of God, I ask the great...
That's nice to hear from at least someone.
I mean, debt...
Like someone with actual power, I mean.
Yeah, no one would talk about...
From like Cory Doctorow or something in the past year, but yeah, that's really nice.
I mean, this one is kind
really
of...
cool.
Exactly. I mean, this one is kind of hidden in there, but this is probably the most important one. I mean, the way that we are continuing a type of colonialism with debt is absolutely maddening, particularly as we need to focus on climate. And it's not mentioned that often. In the name of God, I ask the great extractive industries, mining, oil, forestry, real estate, agribusiness, to stop destroying forests, wetlands, and mountains, to stop polluting rivers and seas, to stop poisoning food and people. In the name of God, I ask the great food corporations to stop imposing monopolistic systems of production and distribution that inflate prices and end up withholding bread from the hungry. In the name of God, I ask arms manufacturers and dealers to completely stop their activity because it foments violence and war. It contributes to those awful geopolitical games which cost millions of lives displaced and millions dead. In the name of God, I ask the technology giants to stop exploiting human weakness, people's vulnerability for the sake of profits without caring about the spread of hate speech, grooming, fake news, conspiracy theories, and political manipulation. In the name of God, I ask the telecommunication giants to ease access to educational material and connectivity for teachers via the internet so that poor children can be educated even under the quarantine, not something we have been talking about. In the name of God, I ask the media to stop the logic of post-truth, disinformation, defamation, slander, and the unhealthy attraction to dirt and scandal, and to contribute to human fraternity and empathy with those who are most deeply damaged. In the name of God, I call on powerful countries to stop aggression, blockades, and unilateral sanctions against any country, anywhere on earth. No to neocolonialism. Conflicts must be resolved in multilateral fora, such as the United Nations. We have already seen how unilateral interventions, invasions, and occupations multilateral end up, even if they are justified by noble motives and fine words. This system, with its relentless logic of profit, is escaping all human control. It is time to slow the locomotive down. An out-of-control locomotive hurtling towards the abyss. There is still time. And it goes on. But it's pretty badass.
Yeah, there were some, like, besides the obvious ones about tech giants, the bits about easing access to educational material and connectivity for teachers, like the bits about the educational materials, it's
copyright.
There are ways to read it, but like copyright exceptions are definitely one of the main ways that could be made to happen. So very based. Do we have a pirate pope now as well?
Yeah, we have a pirate pope. No, but I mean, it's really, really, really good.
Want him to? He can be anarcho-communist pope for you and a pirate pope for some of us.
Yeah, rich people or people with actual power only listen to the pope when it benefits them. This is true, but I think you shouldn't underestimate the actual power. Particularly in Latin America, in large parts of Europe, that he actually has. Like, people do listen to this, and this is he is an important voice, and it's a voice that for so long has coerced people into accepting all of these things. That has told them to know your place in the like, this is a church that could as well fight Islam at this point. This is a church that could have gone right-wing reactionary, and the fact that it is not, we should be so happy for that, because at least at least the right-wing reactionaries cannot use the word of the Pope, to spread their lies.
Sorry. Lost my thought before I got to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the point is, like, this is something that media actually covers. Like, Finland isn't exactly Catholic. Very, very far from it, though. Like, a tiny minority. Like, most are Protestant, and even, like, the number of members of the Protestant state church has been on decline. But, like, our media still reports on what the Pope says. And, like, that's power in itself. Like, agenda setting, media actually covering what you say. And it's even bigger in, like, very large parts of the world, say the Spanish-speaking world. Most of it's Catholic. So they actually hear, like, they pay attention.
Oh yeah, this matters.
These words, these ideas.
Yeah, they definitely matter to a lot of people. Not necessarily Protestant countries, but I mean the thing is,
a lot here that isn't exactly being advocated for by, the political or media establishment in large parts of the world right now.
I think you could also see. I think the easiest way to see the implication of this is to understand what if the Pope would have been a right-wing reactionary. Because if there's anything that the church has been traditionally, I mean, that would have been more in the fighting Islam, saying that this is the religion of death and immigration is the worst. I mean, imagine how the right-wing people all over the world would have flocked in and said, look what the Pope is saying, da 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 da. I mean, I don't know how. It's a very, very important statement. And at least he went to Canada, or he's planning a trip now to Canada, which is really, really important. And we also saw about the things that happen in France that we talked about as well, that they're opening up to this. It's so good to have this man as a little bit of an ally in this, because he can and does stop some of the way that he would otherwise be exploited at this point. And he's incredibly clear. Like, I mean, I think I don't think I've ever heard a Pope this clear. I mean, this is very, very, very much to the point. And I think understandable for most people as well. He is not telling people to sit on your ass and accept the faith of the God. You should go in the military and fight this insurgents, He's telling them to say no. He's telling them to not accept the capitalist system that you're under, essentially, and or the current way that the system is working, and that is quite important. For a lot of religious people, particularly, but even for us who are not, to have an ally there and not necessarily an enemy, because that would be problematic. You're spelling like... Yeah.
Yeah, Kringlan, are you sure that's not you?
Yeah, exactly. Banana Man in here, like the same. It's my. I'm sitting here trying to say China is pretty good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad Banana Man is here. Yeah, I got my eyebrow. Yeah, I don't really. But what if argument here? There's so many else that the Catholic Church could do. I mean, Catholic Church could do. I mean, sure, they could be 10 times better. I agree. They could also be 100 times worse. And right now, at this point, we have a relatively young Pope. Okay, that is clearly not going to play the games of the current political and power era, which is, storming towards nationalism and extremes form of exploitative neoliberalism. And this is, I mean, I'm just happy that like I take any small victory, and he is definitely a force that is slowing that spread, not quickening it at the moment. That makes me. It makes me happy, to be honest. Anyway, related is this. No, what am I doing? Very related to what we just talked about, talking about the one he said about the banks. Poorer countries spend 5 times more on debt than climate crisis. Charity says lower income.
Debt is to mostly the so-called developed world. Also increasingly probably to China nowadays, but I'm actually not sure how the classification is landing right now when it comes to China. Like, probably are they classified as developed or developing still? But yeah, the point is, like, there's a pretty clear divide on like who's indebted to who.
Yeah. Lower income countries spend 5 times more on debt than coping with the impact of climate change and reducing carbon emissions, according to a leading anti-poverty charity. Figures from the Jubilee Debt Campaign show 34% of the world's poorest countries are spending $29 billion on debt payments a year, compared with $5.4 billion on measures to reduce the impact of the climate emergency. Yeah, I mean exactly where this debt comes from, but I mean, like, like you could. This is our policies from since long. I mean, this is not anything new. This is what we and probably what China is continuing to do.
Yeah, there's kind of two perspectives, like from like as a climate person, two main perspectives to this. While it's important that this is getting talked about, it's kind of still considering what the actual numbers when it comes to emissions of the global total look like. It's kind of sad that we're still like directing our gaze to the developing world when it comes to climate action, since most of the, like, obviously it matters that the developing world is able to like improve their conditions in a way that doesn't require them to go through the same route that, well, most of the global north has done, and some are still doing. But still, for now, like currently, and for the next 10 or 15 or so years, that these are the deciding years when it comes to climate mitigation. They are a very small part of the equation relative to, well, say us here in Europe or the US or China. So it's kind of, it's nice that this is like the framing, I guess, for once, that they're pairing it with like this potential solution. Like they're actually saying that like this debt could be used for climate mitigation, but then again, this debt could also be used for any number of other issues that they have a hard time dealing with. We've been doing this to them for a while, and it's not just this, like, can't help but like feel or think that this is now receiving attention, or it's being covered by Western media because we are getting concerned about the climate.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's definitely that sort of thing, which also talks about the climate crisis as if that is a problem of the developing world. And I mean, like Africa in particular. Like if they build a coal power plant, that's good. Do it. Like they are not the net emitters of. They are not contributing to the problem in any way near that we are. And that sort of framing becomes lost in this, because it also makes it sound like this is a big deal. The big thing here should just be poorer countries spend billions on debt. You know, and in particular, it would be interesting to know exactly how big part of that is the World Monetary Fund and EU and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can we just release this debt? I mean, we shouldn't tell them what the fuck to do with it either. You know, like from that point of view, it's just like, you know, fuck, if you want to build a coal power plant, do it. You know, but at least it's good that we talk about it, right? I think, and it's like connecting to the Pope's speech. I mean, he's talking about it as well. Like, it's not commonly talked about.
Yeah, we need to see more of this, more of it. Just debt jubilee. The only context I've heard, I think, of just like forgiving debts. The only discourse I've heard is like the student debt bomb that the US is
not
currently
going to do anything about.
Yeah, but like that's where I've heard it, and that was the context where I think Dr. was writing about it as well. I mean that, and just everything that kind of got like exacerbated by the pandemic.
Yeah.
But again, like it would be nice to hear that discourse happen like on a global level instead of just, again, relatively well-off people in developed countries. I'm not saying like, I mean, it's debatable on many measures, I'm sure, at this point. Like if you pay any attention to how the US is doing, most of the country probably would be categorized as developing if we actually were being applying the same standards everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to dive in here what they're talking about in order to make some interesting to make any sort of deeper analysis of what it is about. And
basically what Dr. writes about is that it's not exactly a hot take to say that there are debts that cannot be paid. Like there are debts that people, or in some cases countries, will never be able to pay. And when things get bad, when things when it, like they're not even able to like shorten the debt anymore, like that's when the tension starts building for real. And if and at one point there are only two options: either those get forgiven, there's some kind of easing up, or everything, like it triggers something and everything goes down.
I think one of the big problems,
kind of an interesting gamble that the debt house are.
I think the problem here is that I mean, it's like the idea of the profit on this is not that you're supposed to be able to pay it back. That's not the idea. You're just supposed to continuously pay, like amortization. What else is it called? The interest, right? And this is what people are paying. This is what almost all countries are paying, because most countries are in debt in one way or the other. It's like you buying your house and you having to pay $6,000 for the rest of your life. That the value of these loans is huge.
It would be interesting to hear like how does that, like we're only seeing absolute sums. So it would be interesting to see read or look into how much like of the relative budget or say GDP that stands for. Since again, as you said, every single country, like our current economic system is based on everyone being in debt all the time.
Yeah.
And the way we judge it is relative.
Let's write this down as another thing that we could actually make a deep dive in, just going through the debt and how that's being handled.
It's interesting that we're talking like absolute numbers, like the way debt in general is supposed to matter is relative. So yeah, let's get back to this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there, anyway, I think we could move on a little bit to we got this one as well. TLDR on DM25. But maybe we could end with that, right?
We've got a couple of things. Whoa, if you like nickname Whoa if you're in chat or tuned in. This we have a couple of things you linked to us in the channel which we haven't taken up before. Sorry about that. Well, I guess we're going to do those tonight.
Yeah. One of them is this.
A kind of a dick move of us to ask you guys to send us links and then not pick them up when you do. So let's fix it. This is one of them. Not that old, actually. Only a week or two, maybe.
Yeah, 11 days. And we didn't do last week, so it's not that bad.
Did you like the name I gave to the card?
Yeah. 3 to 4 Antifa unions against Fash in Italy.
We need to build a mythology. Like there were 3 to 4 Antifa last Friday on Shebel. So
exactly 3 or 4 Antifa
it's
members.
3 or 4 Antifa something.
It's hard to tell.
Unions, yeah.
You know.
So I think I counted on a quick read like 3 listed like big unions. So it definitely falls in the like within the scale of 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Coincidence?
Coincidence? I think not. Demonstrators face off police during a protest against the government's introduction of the Green Pass near Chicago Palace in Rome in October the 9th. This is actually blocked.
How though? It's not blocked for me.
I've reached my article limit. You can read it.
Okay, so Rome, October 16th. Italy's biggest workers' unions rallied in Rome on Saturday and called on the government to dissolve the neo-fascist groups involved in last weekend's violent protest against the COVID-19 health pass. Oh, here we go. You've probably been talking about similar stuff in Sweden as well. But yeah, COVID passes. Last week, police arrested 12 people, including leaders of the extreme right-wing group Forza Nuova, after thousands took to the streets to oppose the mandatory green passes for all workers. Some groups broke through police lines to reach the Prime Minister's office, while others smashed their way into the headquarters of Italy's largest trade union, CGIL. Many of those attending Saturday's rally waved CGIL's red flag as they marched from an area close to the city's main station to the central square of San Giovanni in a crisp sunny afternoon. Italy's main unions, CGIL, CISL, and UIL, all called on the government to dissolve the neo-fascist and neo-Nazi groups at the rally, whose slogan was "No to fascism and violence, yes to work, safety and rights." We ask for concrete acts, not just chatter. It is time for the state to demonstrate its democratic strength in enforcing the laws and the constitution, CGIL's Secretary General Maurizio Landini said from the stage. A country that loses its memory cannot have a future, he added. Organizers estimated between 50,000 and 60,000 people took part. CISL head Pierpaolo Bombardieri said participation was as high as 100,000. Stay away from our head offices, stay away from the squares, Bombardieri said, referring to last week's violent protests. Last week's riots drew widespread condemnation, including from Matteo Salvini and Giorgia Meloni, the leaders of the Rightist League and Brothers of Italy parties, respectively. 2 Forza Nuova leaders remain in custody after a decision by a judge. Yeah.
I mean, this is so good.
Really cool. Institutions rising up against the fascists, like individual street actors not being the only ones doing it.
This is so good. I mean, this is how the unions. This is so important.
So cool.
I mean, it's just really important that to see this thing, and it also kind of breaks the narrative, right? Because I mean, you can see in the U.S. particularly, but it's all around that the workers are being pissed on because of this COVID-19 whatever it is, like the right-wing narrative constantly becomes that, the protests are being, why people are leaving their job is because they have to get vaccinated, or it's like, it's this sort of communism that is growing and that's why people aren't going to work. And they eat that narrative that if the unions go out and protest and show that this is not, for the vast majority of people, it's about salaries, it's about working conditions, it's about rights for workers. That's what it's about. Then that narrative just becomes so, it kills it. So fast.
Yeah, it kind of like when you claim to be the voice of the people and often the voice of the working class.
Yeah,
it might turn out to be pretty powerful if the actual working class shows up to correct the record.
Yeah, it's really important. It's good to see. I have a little.
Again, the issue, like obviously with the various kinds of messes countries have gotten into with the ever-changing restrictions based on COVID. The real issue there, like the real issue people are having a tough time due to the pandemic, is that the governments are refusing to actually, again, guarantee work, safety, and rights to people. Like
exactly what they're saying.
Yeah, you don't have to, like if people have to go to work, like these passes, the main reason they've been hurrying up with these passes and different measures to decide who gets to move around and who doesn't, is that they are in a huge hurry to get everyone back to work and things to normal, to a so-called normal. Like that's the reason they're in such a hurry, and that's the reason there are these measures that can never be quite perfect, which are inevitably going to cause issues to many different groups of people. Like the reason is that the powers that be are really intent on getting things to return to a normal that we're probably never going to get back anyway.
No.
They could be paying people to stay
exactly
at home.
I just did a fast calculation. In Sweden, we're increasing. We're essentially printing 700 billion SEK. This could have gone to guarantee people. This would have been 70,000 for every single person. Everyone, old, young, newborn, work, not. Literally everyone, right? There's so many things that you could have done. You could have.
Yeah, you could even give money to kids who don't even contribute yet. Like imagine children are the greatest freeloader group of each society. They don't even go to work and pay.
You could have rebuilt our whole electrical system and employed hundreds of thousands doing it if you want. There are so many things that could have been done. Instead, this is just leaking out to our biggest corporation, and it's leaking out on the stock market, which is why it's incredibly inflated. The stock. Just look at Tesla. Like the money is not going to the people that need them. That need it, that would spend it in the economy, and then the government is going like, oh, well, that's really weird. How come our the expenditure is not going up? Oh, it's so strange. Like what the fuck? Do you seriously think
basically they're giving the money out to large companies just so the large companies can keep going, keep running probably without actually producing anything during the meantime.
There's so many things here that are fun. Instead, you should offer the employees the possibility to leave their job, and the possibility of feeling safe and getting paid even when they choose to leave their job, who no longer needs them, and let those companies that cannot adjust to a new reality fall. Like it's actually allowing the market to work, but take away the stress of the normal people and let them spend. Let them spend their money because they spend it on things that builds a market. You cannot be surprised that the house in Sweden, the house prices has gone up by 20%. during the fucking pandemic. I mean, do you really think this? You're not spending the money right? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The stock market is like running nuts, even though a lot of these companies doesn't sell anything anymore. I mean, everyone gets that it's a joke, right? And then you're having the house price and going crazy. You're clearly printing money for the wrong people right now. If you want to, it's like being surprised that, oh, this is so strange. We are printing so much money, but they're not spending it on a normal thing. Like, what the fuck? Like, look who you're giving it to. They're not going to buy more potatoes just because they have, 500 million more. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. Like, it's not.
It's taking the money and also laying off people.
Yeah, I mean, that's what. Yeah, we were talking about that in Sweden earlier. I mean, and
so we have some stuff.
Frustrating as hell.
A lot of stuff in the chat from Banana Man. No worries about going off on a single point, since climate is also very much my thing. But we just happen to have like a huge backlog of stuff to go through tonight, so there isn't as much climate as there could be.
No.
Or not though. The COP26 is about to begin, so I'm sure we can.
Oh yeah.
I can stuff the next 2 weeks worth of this segment with just climate.
You know what? Let's take 2 quick climate things and just jump through them really quick. Speaking of climate, I just thought it was kind of fun. It's nothing new, but what Europe would look like if all the ice caps melted. You can. I mean, it's not too bad. It's not good for Sweden. It really isn't.
That's a lot of people, though.
Stockholm is fucking gone. Where I live is absolutely gone. I mean, that's also the thing. Most people live along the coastlines, and well, there's just so many cities that are here. Deltas are like. I mean, London is gone. Poor London. I'm not sure if Paris is gone. Madrid is. Look at Spain. We should move to Spain.
I mean, London's pretty much always had issues being built onto a delta, but like a huge delta, but still, yeah.
I mean, all of the major cities in Sweden are gone. Well, all of them. There's no big cities left.
Yep.
Even Umeå is probably gone up here.
Yeah.
Like our islands.
Mostly.
This is so sad.
Like our second largest city nowadays is inland. So we've been just pumping a lot of money, a lot of the state budget into keeping like basically more rural areas alive. Something like Sweden, for instance, stopped doing a few decades ago. So we might not be as fucked as some others. But I mean, once this happens, like imagine the amount of people who need to be relocated. Imagine just like the lost arable land. Imagine like just the sheer like once we're at this point, the economy. Like, there is no economy anymore, as we know it.
I mean,
There's no...
yeah, it's not going to happen over a day, but it's definitely... I mean,
basically,
there is no Denmark.
About, mitigation adaptation, which we should favor. Basically, for instance, with the huge heat waves, like the heat domes in Northern America, just a few months ago, like, there is no adapting to your town being burnt down within a day.
No.
Like, there's no adapting to that. You're just fucked.
Yeah, and also, it seems like... And this is what we also talked about. What it means is unpredictability. And that is incredibly bad. Because it's an ongoing change. And that means that it's not going to settle down. This is just going to keep on changing. You cannot plan what you can grow. I mean, the food, like, even at a mild level, this is so bad for us. And
so did this have any extra information, like any qualifying information, like what model or what year with what assumptions?
No, it's just the assumption that all ice has melted.
Right.
This is it's not going to become higher than this. this is the potentially highest if we melt all ice. But Slothington Pan says entire countries are gone, and you talk about London. That's based. Yep, yeah, Denmark is now a little island.
Finland's Anglo.
Yeah, my
Anglo-Saxon
Anglo-Saxon
for you.
Stupid. Yeah, I don't know why I focus on London.
Like we can go to we can do Britain every once in a while, but we won't make it a focus.
I mean,
US is off limits. That's my rule for the segment. But Britain we can sometimes comment on. But it's nice that you guys are keeping Klingon in check as well.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
I mean, it's almost like Scandinavia has become an island.
I mean, implying that's very Swedish of you to say that, like, we're not already living on an island, because, like, just if the perspective is from Central Europe, Finland is basically a forested piece of rock far to the northeast.
I'm pretty Scandinavian, I guess. I don't know. Like, well, the thing is, at least Finland. What do you say? You are following us. No, you're not sticking with Russia here. In the Scandinavian island of the future. I'm not sure how the tectonic plates work here.
It's growing a bit. Quite a bit there.
I haven't watched the tectonic shift. Are we crashing into Europe at the moment? Are we moving away? I don't even know. I gotta check this out at some point.
Yeah, this is supposed to be my area. I really need to get back to doing my mandatory natural geography reading. Maybe I can get back to you if you remind me.
Yeah, I mean, because
Well, I know that, like, if we manage to keep the sea level rise to, I don't know, something manageable, it might actually not be as bad in some parts of the Baltic Sea, basically. Mostly like the Gulf of Bothnia up north, like basically the area close to our border between Finland and Sweden, since the ground is still rising up there at a pretty brisk pace, geologically speaking. Like it was pressed down so hard after the Ice Age that it's still trying to come back from it.
Yeah, I think currently we're at a ±0 still because of the land race.
Currently we're still at a plus for many parts of it. And I've been meaning to look into like how, like if it's different for the Baltic Sea compared to the oceans, like what happens there between Denmark and Sweden, like there's a lot of interesting stuff. Like it affects the way that like life happens in the Baltic, since it's less saline, like there's less salt and everything than in the oceans.
Let's say it could be a lot worse. Africa is crashing into us, though. That I know.
Yeah, but that's not like...
It's going to take a little bit longer.
In the near term.
A little bit longer. Slightly longer. Shouldn't there be a country to the west of Spain? It's here, Portugal. I don't think it would be...
Yeah, it's just... We don't have borders here.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Turkey is just... It's an archipelago.
I'm not sure if they've done some... like if there are...
It's not. It's really not the best source for this.
There are other models, since a lot of the colors, like, are they implying like desertification in Southern Europe as well? They might be.
It's hard to tell. It looks like it.
Looking at Russia and like the Middle East as well, like it's pretty dry and some during some parts of the year, but maybe not that dry.
You're probably right. But again, this is just some Reddit.
Yeah, again, like a citation, like any kind of something
you're not gonna
check.
It was more for a fun little look than anything serious. But that again is something that raises interest, and we could definitely make a whole episode about, which is so.
Yeah, like actual implications, current research. What do the next 50 or so years, or 50 or 100 years, look like for Europe, based on the likely scenarios?
I'm gonna write it down, actually.
Yeah, there's always room for more climate.
All right. Good stuff. It was just a quick thing. The French piece, expect worst honey harvest in half a century. I think that's, it's not just a French piece. This is pretty everywhere, right? Like I've heard that it's...
Yeah, bees are fucked everywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't
insects
have
are fucked.
time to look for an English article on it, but apparently there's like a new study on the effects of glyphosate, which is one of the most used pesticides, and it's been like there's been constant fighting over whether it's too dangerous to use. Like apparently it over like cancer risks in humans, but I'm not sure if the effects on pollinators or other bugs has been as much of an issue. But like if it hasn't, that's one of our big mistakes there. Like the defenders of glyphosate have mostly been saying like it's not as bad as the stupid hippies make it out to be. And they might have like actually said that based on just like the research we have on effects on humans, just like by ignoring the pollinator stuff entirely, because it's pretty bad. Like maybe I'll dig it up for next time since this is actually interesting. But apparently it fucks up like the navigational systems, like the navigational ability that bees have. They just lose their memory. And they can't navigate. They can't do what they usually do. Find the flowers, find their way back to the hive. This kind of thing.
It's not
and
very
then we wonder why the populations are plummeting.
Yeah. This one is one you picked up. Student racism now ignites colonial board game debate.
Yeah, so since we're avoiding US, but still clearly people like going into culture war issues, I figured I'd bring this in, since now we have a whole article in English about it. It took maybe like a week extra for something to come out in English. But yeah, would you like to read it?
Yeah, the popular Finnish board game African Täti, or the Star of Africa. This we played. I think this was popular, and I know that we played it as kids. Has been at the center of a lively social media debate in recent days. You're essentially walking around trying to uncover diamonds, and there's a lot of let's just say explorer colonialism kind of ideas.
You just walk. Africa's a place you can just walk into and pick up some natural riches.
Take diamonds, get a Mac, and there is a lot of things. Let's just say the figurines and stuff are a little bit problematic. Anyway, the discussion.
Figurines are actually not problematic. Like the gaming pieces are not that bad, but the general backdrop is kind of funky. Very outdated. The actual gameplay isn't like besides the general theme, like the obviously colonialist. The theme with the obvious colonialist, like just background and context, the actual game mechanics aren't as bad.
Okay, I can't really remember.
They could be, but we'll probably get to that.
Yeah. The discussion began when tabloid Iltalehti reported in Finnish that a number of first-year geography students at the University of Helsinki dressed as Star of Africa characters to attend a game-themed student-organized event. The choice of output was criticized by a German exchange student on the photo sharing a social media platform, Instagram. The post quickly ignite a wider debate about the game and the era of colonialism it represents. And I mean, I'm so happy that it does, right? Fatim Diarra, the Greens, chair of the City Council of Helsinki, wrote on Twitter that the game is very dear to her, especially as her father is from Mali, which only gained independence from French colonial rule somewhere after the year of Star of Africa was released. Diarra added that she welcomes the conversation about racist elements that present themselves within Finnish society and the increased recognition of certain stereotypes and behavior as negative. On Tuesday, the University of Helsinki official Twitter account wrote that the students had been caught up in an unreasonable social media storm and that everyone should be given a room to make mistakes and learn from them. There is still a lack of understanding about racism in Finnish society and at the university. We do not always understand how social practices and structures feel to people who experience racism continuously in their lives, the university tweeted, adding that a 3-day anti-racism training program had already been prepared for staff, as well as a section on anti-racism tutor training. However, many other commenters have questioned the relevance of such debate over a board game and question whether the classic game will now be banned. Yle therefore asked researchers and specialists for their opinions on how the 17-year-old game looks in 2021.
Yeah, so the article is apparently super long, which is actually nice that they took their time and did a proper write-up instead of jumping on the clickbait scandal train that the other media, for the most part, jump on. So that's actually pretty nice. There's a lot that wasn't covered by the first part. The rest of it is basically just analysis and perspectives on the game. But the actual events. So, first year geography students. I'm actually studying geography at the University of Helsinki, but I'm one of those marginalized people who never really managed to integrate into the student community. So I wasn't actually involved in a way in organizing the first year events, for instance. But and neither did I participate in them. But I kind of did some research, looked around a bit on certain channels when this was going on, like the worst of it had hit media and also social media. And what actually happened, dressing as Star of Africa characters as a theme, the characters were just like literally the game pieces, one of which you can see in the first picture, just a regular, like a very cookie cutter plastic small one colored piece. Like they were literally just wearing clothes of a certain color, and some of them were dressed as these bandits, which you can see on one of the flat pieces further down, and that was the theme basically. And apparently at each stop during the event, like they had to go from one place to another, and all the teams had to do this entrance sort of routine at every spot, every stop. And the routine for these guys was that somehow the people dressed up as bandits accosted the player characters who are just like in colored clothing. And apparently, like I think it still hasn't been properly covered by anyone, and I'm not sure we'll ever find out how the game of broken telephone happened. But this exchange student who made made an issue out of it, and eventually, like after a week of like not getting the response they wanted from the student organization, say, or the university, they somehow got the idea that, say, like slaves and slave owners were involved. And like it's kind of unclear like how the exchange student heard of this, since apparently that person hadn't participated in this event themselves, and what the description of the event or these routines had been like. But there was, from the very beginning, there was like some broken telephone going on. Like obviously the point about this game, the theme and the design being very obviously like having a colonialist mindset, and also the imagery, like just the paintings there, the depictions of local populations, are they have these racist stereotypes and like these racist very like these elements of these racist caricatures that have been identified in like the many people who have followed these discourses are familiar with. But still, like what actually happened was blown way out of proportion, since there was no like slave and slave owner LARPing or anything. It was just like bandits and game pieces. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so pretty typical for this culture war. But there is
kind of telling that this, like, this article, while otherwise taking like a huge effort to actually do some background and like get multiple voices in regarding the game itself, they don't actually mention that it was kind of like there was this element of like pointless scandal to how it ended up in media to begin with.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really balanced. I think at the best, it raises the awareness and helps people to probably get rid of some stereotypes. Because when you're doing like this, which they do in this article, they're teaching about the history. Right?
Yep.
During the 1940s and 1950s, many Finnish people had a very scant understanding of the continent of Africa. Yeah. It goes through, what's really problematic. In fact, the period of colonial rule and the colonialism of the African continent by European countries led not just to economic exploitation, but also caused enormous human suffering, for example, through the slave trade family, blah, blah, blah. The mining of gemstones and the diamond trade have also caused a lot of problem in Africa. And it is also kind of perpetuating this idea, again, like you also said there, that Africa was just wild tribes there. You could just travel there and take, like there wasn't, which I feel is fundamental to a mindset that is still fairly strong in the West. That there are countries, but only after we made them. There was no civilizations south of Egypt. It was just wild tribes, and they didn't have any culture. It was like, I mean, it's very very ahistoric, and so I mean it's really good when they do like this. You gotta kind of comment there, because then it becomes worse, and hopefully at least some people read this and they become a little bit more aware.
Yeah, it's very good that we had this discussion. Like that's the sort of the obvious bright side of this, but still, it's yet another example of certain media like taking the opportunity to blow things out of proportion in a way that usually doesn't end up like doing any good for at least any of the people involved, since very predictably, even though there was this whole huge ruckus about cancel culture and the universities are ruined once again, and like in my day we could still have good fun without nobody getting too upset over it.
So much bullshit.
All of this, but like in the end, like from just my vantage points at least, there was way more worry about the students who, like, if you scroll up the first link to Iltalehti, you can see the picture of the students who were dressed up with this theme. And you can literally, the faces are censored. The quality is so bad that literally, like, if they're lucky, like, their fellow students can maybe recognize them there. But, like, seriously. So what I came across was worry about, like, the undue negative attention that these people potentially might receive because of this thing, before like there being any reports of any of these people actually getting any shit over this.
Yeah, I mean this
in
the
beginning, like the people from the geography students, like just the geography students organization, were doing the media stuff and commenting on it and trying to find out what happened and just communicating to the membership and to the rest of the world. And also then once it was brought to the national media, obviously, then like the top level organization of like the Helsinki Student Union was contacted, as well as the University of Helsinki. And at that point, like there were like conflicting messages and like these weird apologies that were clearly given out before the people writing them were even aware about the details of what had happened.
Yeah. Always.
And in the end, like based on like everything I saw on social media and all the comments by even like the people who thought like did think that like there are things to criticize about this game. Like the only people getting shit and targeted because of all of this were the exchange students, and secondarily a couple of institutions, mostly the Helsinki Student Union and the University of Helsinki, for like actually reacting to it because they were forced to react by like media pressure. And like again, it's really obvious who ended up getting shit and having like a really bad time because of this. And it definitely wasn't like, I'm pretty sure nobody got cancelled over this.
Yeah, and by the way,
they steal the narrative.
This was never called Afrikas stjärna in Swedish. Like Naknud says, it was called Jakten efter den försvunna diamanten, the hunt for the lost diamond.
Oh.
It's kind of interesting. But I mean, yeah, so here's the tweet. So during the freshman introduction weeks, Finnish white students love to dress up as colonizers. I mean, obviously this is going to float. This is going to become huge. Everything here is all sorts of stupid.
Yeah, and again, colonizers, yeah, that's fair. Like that would be actually accurate, but apparently, again, could be that the original images or videos are actually lost to time already, but apparently there were accusations of them dressing up as slaves and slave owners.
No, this is the original tweet.
I recall where like those comments supposedly, or those statements supposedly were, is also kind of telling. It was really hard to make sense of it at the like around a week after that event happened.
I mean, like if this hits someone who is not familiar with the game, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, they're just going to be, oh my god, that is really bad.
Yeah, and I mean that outrage is understandable. And it's so easy to capitalize on. I mean, in a certain way. I mean, like, and that's the Twitter madness. I mean, you can hate that or love that, but that's also what the algorithms create, right? That outrage is built into it. Like it's and I'm just so happy to see this article that they made. I mean, this is so good. This is how media should deal with these stories. I mean, they're going through the game, they're explaining, talking about it, and hopefully people who may not be aware of why this made the games a little bit problematic.
Exactly. Most of the discussion that this part was actually good and very thoughtful and very even-handed, and still there are many people who are trying to like go after like the cancellation angle or like the maximum culture war mode angle, which is weird since like this is a sign that we're actually making progress.
Yeah. I mean, this
is narrative. They're trying to force this into the same narrative of the universities ruined by wokeism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course.
The threat of cancellation.
Well, so we're not even going to be able to play board games anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's inspired by by Indiana Jones. Yeah, so the 60s, and I mean I think the.
The article actually goes into, apparently, I haven't read through all of it, but goes into the person who created the game and his inspirations. So if you're interested, just pick up the link.
Yeah, actually, it's older. Starvac was developed in the late 1940s by Kari Minnerla. What is even the...
Kari Mannerla.
19 years old and was released in 1950, and at the time when large parts of African continent were still under European colonial rule. The main objective of the game is to find a legendary giant diamond, the Star of Africa, while exploring the continent and collecting other gemstones but avoiding robbers. Once the diamond has been located, the player must race to the northern African cities of either Cairo or Egypt or Tangier in Morocco, which are the start and end points of the game. At the time, University of Turkey researcher Uli Löyty told Yle that they first started participating in discussions about the colonialism aspect of the board game in the late 1990s. At the time, Lehto said that he received deluxe version of the game from Manela in the email with a cover letter enclosed. In the letter, Manela explained that he had been a victim of the writings of Tarzan creator Edgar Rice Burroughs when he created the game, and that he was not familiar with African history as he would later become. Manela died in 2006.
Yeah, so this is another point that came up in social media discussions as well, that even like, I think it actually went back even to the 90s or maybe 80s, that these like certain aspects, problematic aspects had been brought up, and the original creator of the game had welcomed those. Like he'd have said that already back then, decades ago, that he was happy that this is being discussed.
Yeah. Burroughs had been a strong supporter of eugenics and scientific racism, writing the Tarzan series to reflect his beliefs. Tarzan is hugely important to our that, and Indiana Jones also is greatly important to many modern people. Like how that sort of it's incredible that you have a whole series that is essentially stealing other people's artifacts. I mean, they're essentially
like,
thieves.
Tons of people who go into archaeology get inspired, like do that because they saw Indiana Jones as a kid.
But yeah, I mean, this is a great way of how media could handle this. At least let's. I'm uplifted by this.
Take it up. I was actually surprised by quality of it.
How to handle it and how to actually have the
how
debate.
to diffuse the cultural war bomb, basically.
Could DiEM25 solve Europe's democratic deficit? The new party explained. Let's watch this.
Let's see how long it is.
I think it's only 10 minutes, typically 9. I should be fine.
Yeah. Maybe if we go through all of it at once and then the comments off.
No stoppage.
This video was suggested by viewers in our topic suggestion form, so thanks to all of those people, and add your ideas by clicking the link below. DiEM25, which has as its full name the Democracy in Europe Movement 2025, is a left-wing, Europe-wide movement with the aim of essentially saving the EU from itself. DiEM was founded by Yanis Varoufakis, the eccentric former Greek finance minister. For those of you who don't know, Varoufakis was an economics professor at the University of Athens until 2015, when he was recruited by the left-wing government to sort out the Greek debt crisis. Varoufakis has been an outspoken left-wing critic of the EU, and in 2016, partly out of a concern that Brexit would be the beginning of the end for the EU, he founded DiEM25. Today, DiEM enjoys support from a host of other renowned academics, including Noam Chomsky and Slavoj Žižek. DiEM has 4 constituent parts: a coordinating collective, a validation council, DiEM spontaneous collectives, and an advisory board, and is entirely crowdfunded. DiEM seem to have 2 main criticisms of the EU in its current form though. Firstly, they think that the EU isn't democratic enough. Policy making is too detached from regional and national assemblies, and too influenced by unelected bureaucrats. Secondly, they think the EU isn't transparent enough. With over 10,000 lobbyists in Brussels and seemingly endless layers of democracy, it's difficult for the average European citizen to get a sense of how the EU actually works, and this obviously makes it harder for them to hold EU-level politicians accountable. According to DiEM, this lack of transparency and democratic accountability has meant that the EU only serves the rich and powerful, and has become incapable of solving the 5 crises afflicting Europe. These being debt. Essentially, certain European countries are saddled with debt, and this affects the well-being of their citizens. Banks. DiEM argues that unregulated finance creates unnecessary economic crises. Poverty. According to data from the EU in 2019, over 20% of Europe's population lives at risk of poverty, and the number of Europeans in actual poverty has been rising. low investment, DM argue that austerity and the wider economic orthodoxy have created a culture of dangerously low investment across Europe and migration. DM argue that poor economic conditions across Europe have forced people to emigrate. So, what are the solutions to these 5 crises? Well, according to DM, unless we reform the EU, there are only 2 possible outcomes. Retreat into the cocoon of our nation-states, or surrender to the Brussels democracy-free zone. Pretty pessimistic stuff then. So, what are DM going to do to solve it? Well, unlike other Eurosceptic outfits, they want to keep the EU, and use the current structures to reform it, ideally by 2025. They plan on using a bottom-up approach by mobilising at the grassroots level, forming alliances with similar European parties, and eventually winning elections. Their plan is composed by 8 so-called pillars, and they've got some pretty interesting ideas. Firstly, they've got transparency, which does what it says on the tin, make the EU more transparent. Secondly, refugees and migration. DM want to overrule the EU-Turkey agreement, which came into force in March of 2016, essentially limiting the number of migrants that can come into Europe, and adopt a more humanitarian attitude to refugees and migrants. DM also hope that by addressing its socio-economic and environmental causes, they'll be able to limit involuntary migration within Europe. Thirdly comes labour. DM want to implement a form of universal basic income, known as a universal basic dividend, which would essentially be a percentage of European companies' profits, especially those countries which have benefited from technology developed by public funding. This is essentially a European basic income, but instead of being a fixed number, it will be defined as a percentage of companies' revenue. Fourthly is the European Constitution, with DM wanting to create a new, simplified constitution which devolves more powers to the national and regional assemblies, instead of the current plethora of European treaties. Fifth comes the vision for culture. DM place an unusually strong emphasis on the breakdown of European culture, which they blame on the subordination of culture to the market. They're a bit vague on this point, but they want to create a so-called democratic culture to replace the current culture wars. Sixth is technological sovereignty, where DM want to establish a digital commonwealth to protect Europe's technological sovereignty from big corporations. This involves strengthening privacy regulations, stronger anti-monopoly regulations, and interestingly, creating data unions. Data unions would basically mean citizens pooling their data, giving them more bargaining power against big tech companies, who currently have practically free access and control over user data. Seventh is the Green New Deal, with DM's Green New Deal for Europe aiming for a massive investment of 500 billion euros annually for 5 years, with this being funded by borrowing from the European Central Bank to create well-paid, secure jobs across the country. And finally is the European New Deal. This would essentially involve ending austerity, massively increasing investment across the European continent, and taming unregulated finance. A big part of this proposal includes creating a Europe-wide public digital payment platform to replace the current private banking system. Essentially, every European taxpayer would have a single account, and they could use it to trade with any other. It will be free to use without any profit motive, allowing for more transactions, which should mean better economic growth. It will also allow governments to borrow directly from citizens, who can make a profit on any lending, cutting out private banks as the middlemen. It should also give central banks more information and therefore control over their economies. DM were way ahead of their time on this one, because post-Bitcoin, this has become a pretty mainstream idea. A lot of governments are already toying with the idea of state-owned digital currencies and digital wallets, as we explained in this video, which is linked down below. So if those are their 8 pillars, then how is it going for the party? Well, 2025 looks like a pretty optimistic target now. In Greece, Yanis Varoufakis' party, which is part of the DM25 movement, won just 9 out of the 300 seats in the lower chamber, with just 3.4% of the vote. The most electorally successful DM-affiliated party is probably in Poland, who as part of the wider Polish left bloc, won 13% of the 2019 parliamentary elections. Basically, the point is that they don't look like they'll be in power anywhere anytime soon. Part of the issue is that DM have struggled to form alliances with other left-wing Eurosceptics like Oscar Lafontaine in Germany or Jean-Luc Mélenchon in France, because they usually advocate for either leaving the EU or at least abandoning the euro, while Varoufakis and DM are pro-EU and only want to reform the union. But perhaps this isn't the most generous evaluation of DM's successes. While they apparently haven't yet been successful as a political outfit, they do seem to be a relatively effective pressure group. While they obviously can't take full credit, some of the main ideas, a European Green New Deal, a public digital payment platform, universal basic income of some sort, and the end of austerity, have all become pretty mainstream today. And you could argue that DM25 were ahead of their time in that respect. But what do you think? Comment your thoughts on DM below. And if you want to debate this topic or any other, you can always join the TLDR Discord server. There's a link to that below too.
What did Pirates say about that? I mean, it's pretty similar to most of the Pirates parties.
So one thing I knew already that the Czech Pirate Party they have like signed or ratified, I'm not sure what the technical term was, but they sort of like signed one of the DM manifestos from years, sometime last decade. That's something I came across earlier, and apparently, while trying to look for like the proof for this, like the article or the list, I came across an article which mentioned that some people are like individual in the Czech Pirate Party as individuals are also members of the DM25. This is from 2017, and those two people are Mikuláš Peksa, who is one of the Pirates MEPs, and Ondřej Fafant. So there's definitely at least some cross-pollination and also apparently just like individual level overlap between DM25 and the Pirates, at least in Czechia. Others I don't know so much about, but yeah, this stuff, just the UBI stuff, especially, and the like furthering of democracy and transparency in the EU. Those have been there from the very beginning. They've been kind of catching up, I think, with they've been really proactive in latching on to these opportunities to, pick up on the European New Deal or European Green New Deal ideas, like bringing the sort of the climate push and also the like techlash, basically, in the past half a decade, I think. I think not all of that was there, like when they got started. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap, and I mean, arguably, since they have been pushing for a number of things that are now just pretty mainstream, or at least being talked about, you could argue that they have been successful with something at least, even if they don't have proper representation anywhere.
No, but it's definitely. It's interesting to see. I mean, it's interesting to see. This is really what I think the Pirates should be interested in getting closer, because I think there's a type of populism that is important to embrace. Not being shy of certain ideas, knowing that, and this is like my problem. If you want to get half the way, sometimes you have to go all the way in your rhetoric. You're never gonna get what you want, so you need to be very kind of principled.
You have to always do that.
Yeah.
If you don't do it yourself, you have to just hope and rely on someone else to go there, so you can be sort of the moderate in between who actually does some of the follows behind and maybe gets to do some of the implementation. But then again, you don't necessarily get much credit at that point.
No, and you need to shift the discussion, because it's all about framing as well. When you start shifting it out of the old type of framing, sometimes that requires you to take a position that is.
Look into some of their more recent stuff, I mean, they've been quick at churning out these statements about and just policy proposals regarding regarding big tech and climate and just these big infrastructure plans. So I assume they put out something on COVID as well, like some kind of a reaction. Maybe a new manifesto. I have some I remember seeing something that pointing to that direction. Anyway, since one of the points was that the austerity in the economic policy that's prevalent in the EU is leading into dangerously low investments, and that has kind of been changing with at least some extent. At least like the monetary policy behind there has changed during the pandemic. So it would be interesting to look into their analysis of whether we are there already or what we are missing, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But cool. I mean, I think that's at least that kind of sums up. There's a lot of things today, which is good. 2 weeks. Yep. 2 weeks of stories.
Yeah, there is.
Maybe one left. I need to check if I'm missing a meeting probably.
Yeah, there's some like really old ones, which are not just even news articles. Yeah, there is Poland. It's from today actually. Hot off the presses.
Yeah, I can't. I need to get into a meeting actually. I'm working late
it's
night.
It's very quick though.
Okay.
It's basically on the card. Poland finally gets fined.
All right.
Yep. So Europe finally got its shit together and over this rule of law issue with Poland, and now there are economic sanctions. So
that's good.
I guess we're going to. It's not even a bold move at this point. It's just like the bare minimum, but we'll see how it goes for them.
Yeah, this we have to follow up on. It's really good they're doing something.
Yeah.
Excellent. It's probably not enough. We'll see. Who knows? Good shit. Well, tomorrow is a Thursday, and we may not be streaming tomorrow because I know Otto wants to take me and meet people that I'm supposed to meet. But it depends on if the syndicalists are ready, then we will do that. If they are not, we will simply skip tomorrow and go for Friday, Shebel, like usual. And that's the plan.
So is there like a Halloween special or something?
There's a Halloween special, that's correct. We will stream from the studio. There will be some shit happening. Hopefully I will be able to get a dress. Probably not, because it's like, I don't know, I'm not going to have time for that now. But
dress as in dressing up or an actual dress?
As a dress, yeah. I'm going to be pretty. So cute.
Nice.
But there will be
raccoon ears as well.
Yeah, I wish I had some raccoon ears. There's just so many things that I wanted to do. Now, we'll see what happens. Probably I'm going to be dressed as me. That's it.
If you're doing any of the usual segments, you probably want to do the Norrlänning as part of Moosman.
All right. Yeah, we gotta talk. That's brilliant.
That guy might deserve his own program at some point, or just the deep end of conspiracy boomers on social media. But maybe Shebel is the right place to start with that.
Yeah.
Now.
Perfect. Yes, that's good. I'll remember that. People, we'll see you tomorrow or the day after. Until then, sleep tight.
See you next week.
See ya.
PTV, oberoende, piratistisk media, skapad och finansierad av tittarna.